No person can hear any reasoning if they aren't ready for that. It's no surprise that the modern human being eats tad bit too much, especially if you're living in the westernized part of the world, which is the huge part of the whole population on Earth. As much as we would like to bitch and moan about living conditions and how we have it very hard, difficult, and we don't have any break from tough times, generally speaking, the living standards have been increasing drastically, and with that, the access to food, cheap food, calorie-dense food, which is what we are going to talk about in this video. Why do we eat so much? Let's see what the conclusion is.
It's clear that a great many of us eat too much, and in response, a huge industry has grown up which advises us to consume more quinoa, pomegranate and fennel salad, and, as often as we can, kale and apple soup. But this is entirely to misunderstand why we start eating excessive amounts. It has nothing to do with food, and therefore trying to change our diet isn't the most logical place to focus our efforts.
As with many other things, we cannot point out one particular thing as being the reason to our distress. Everything that we create is for a purpose, and us going over the top, abusing it, misusing it, can't be brushed off as being mere a devilish creation. We have to take responsibility for our own lives, which is not very easy. I understand that. Most of the people are keen to being led, want their hands held and guided throughout their life. Food isn't devilish. Technology isn't devilish. It's your attitude, your unconscious, abusive character that is the problem.
We eat too much because what we're really hungry for isn't available. Of course, it looks as if everything we could want should be to hand. Our supermarkets and delis are iconic temples of consumer society. Our restaurants spare no effort trying to satisfy us. Could Sir or Madam be tempted by lobster thermidor or a selection of regional vegetables drizzled with olive oil sourced from a tiny farm in the Pyrenees?
I've made a video about addictions and I highly recommend for you to check that one out. Basically, addictions can be manifested in different shapes and forms. What you're addicted to has nothing to do with the substance that you are abusing. It all boils down to your deep psychological issues and lackluster self-love because you aren't fulfilled internally. You try to tap that hollow feeling by bringing in something externally to fill that gap, and that can be alcohol, drugs, food, exercises, anything that your mind gets attached to. And as you feel that first dopamine rush, you become addicted because you want to relieve that feeling of satisfaction when your mind doesn't go around all the time.
It sounds nice, but if we could really choose anything, wouldn't we want a slightly different menu? For example, unstressed conversation of father, marinated in mutual forgiveness. Tenderized maternal love, suitable for those on a criticism-free diet. Ripe friendship, served on wry banter, accompanied by a side serving of affectionate teasing.
So basically what he's saying is that we're trying to stuff ourselves with food because we feel empty of the emotional fulfillment, and we try to escape our problems, our past traumatic experiences, by distracting ourselves with something externally, such as food, or other examples that I brought up. If you aren't overweight, someone in your family is. And the same thing can be said about myself. My parents have always been overweight. And the saddest part is that you cannot do something, and it's up to them to make the choices if they are willing to transform their lives. No person can hear any reasoning if they aren't ready for that. The eyes can see when the mind is blind. Persuasion is almost impossible if they aren't willing to listen. And that comes from emotional conviction, knowing that it's time.
Fresh conversation, liberally sprinkled with poignant anecdotes for two. Sexual appreciation with all the trimmings. Our sommelier recommends as the ideal accompaniment a glass of full-bodied Chateau Fantaisie. And for dessert, perhaps, a generous scoop of honeyed insight. In other words, it isn't food we crave.
The highest thing that we crave in this life is love. And love is not about fuzzy, warm feeling. It's about acceptance of yourself, your life. Life doesn't care about goals and ambitions. It will do what it does, and you have to accept its course. The problem with eating too much and other addictions rise even higher when the population becomes even more individualized. You do your work sitting at home, you go to the gym, you cook your own food or have a takeout. You do everything by yourself, and lackluster social life starts to creep up and make you uncomfortable. You may not know initially what it's about, but after some time, you will understand. You are feeling lonely. And as I said previously, all problems stem from lacking love, and loneliness is lacking love for yourself.
The menus of our actual restaurants, however chic, prompt us only in very limited and restricted directions. They understand and respond to only a desperately narrow segment of our true appetites. Collectively, we speak so much of food and so little of what we properly need. It isn't pizza, Spanish cheese, or Argentinian steak. We need friendship, where we can confess our darkest anxieties and be heard and forgiven.
We're biologically evolved to be drawn to high-calorie foods in order to make our survival easier, effective. But as of now, we don't have shortage of food, not in the biggest part of the world at least. If before we had hefty, calorie-dense food in 1 week, today we can have it every day, every meal. And that per se, of course, increases the weight of the population and the overall health in general. Food has a great meaning in the history of humanity. It's something social that we do in order to interact with our family members or new friends, get to know somebody, but because it has become so accessible and suppliers not taking their responsibility by marketing very unhealthy foods, the physical condition of the modern human sapiens deteriorates in a fast pace. I'm not blaming on someone. Those companies don't know better. And operating from a lower consciousness, you of course create more suffering.
We need help in calming down at key moments, reassured that we can withstand the very worst that may be coming our way. We are lonely and angry within our own families and are crying out for redemption and cathartic honesty. We need someone who can help us discover our real talents in the workplace and offer us a guide to realize our true potential. We know that when reaching for a tube of potato chips or biting into yet another burrito, that the problem doesn't lie there. We just don't know where else to turn, and there is at least a short-term satisfaction to be found.
When the wound is aching very heavily, you will do everything in order to suppress that feeling, that pain. And food is a great escape. It tastes good, it gives you a lot of satisfaction in the moment being, and you think for yourself that you will deal with the consequences tomorrow. But then the next day comes, and you look at yourself in the mirror, reminiscing the past day of binging, and you feel bad, both physically and psychologically. You punish yourself, you calm down. Some days pass and you repeat the same story. The fact is, the problem of obesity happens very slowly. This is why people don't react harshly when they see the body changes, because it happens very slowly, incremental changes that they don't notice. Yes, food can be enjoyed, but first of all, it has to be treated as a source of energy.
We eat too much because we hate ourselves too much to do ourselves the honor of looking after our bodies. Our tragedy isn't our unconstrained appetite, but rather the difficulty we have in getting access to the emotional and psychological things that would nourish our broken souls.
The more psychological baggage that you have, the less you will be prone to react to your bodily changes. It's like you become blinded. If your inner is hollow, your external will project it. And as paradoxical as it might sound, emptiness within can be manifested as fullness without.
The diet industry has latched onto the symptoms of our unhappiness, but not their causes, and therefore the solutions it offers can only ever be temporary and fragile. It can't make us lastingly thin because it's not engaging with what made us manically fat. A couple of 100 years ago, it was almost impossible for most people to find anything very pleasant to eat. Since then, a vast quantity of human ingenuity has been devoted to enticing the palate. We have succeeded beyond our wildest expectations.
Exactly what I was speaking about previously. If you caught and slaughtered a big beast, you could feast for a week, and then there's only fruits and berries left. Some time passes by, you burn off that energy, and the cycle begins again. But as of now, you can do the same slaughtering of the beast every day.
But in so many other areas, we've hardly begun to supply ourselves reliably with what we long to consume, which are, to put it plainly, understanding, tenderness, forgiveness, reconciliation, and closeness. We eat too much not because we are, as we brutally accuse ourselves of being, greedy, but because we live in a world where the shelves are still bare of the real ingredients we crave.
Even greediness is a problem of lacking self-esteem, lacking love for yourself. So in that sense, it's the same thing. We may seem to have a lot of external problems, but majority of them stem from the bad self-image, psychological issues that we wear and cannot seem to resolve. To do that, you have to have a dedication to solve your problems once and for all. And the first step begins by looking inwardly. I highly recommend to check this video out about addictions. It will give you more substance on the matter. Can we have a relationship with food, or our relationships are only designated towards people? Tell me in the commentary what you think. But for now, Hossein out.